Okay, so is live ops a plot by evil megacorps to destroy the playing experience? Anyone? Anyone think that live ops, games as a service, is evil? Genuinely, I get this. I honestly get people telling me I am evil because I'm trying to do live ops. No, it's the opposite. To make a good live ops game, we have to actually care about the player. We actually have to think about why they would stay. If you are evil, how can you possibly think about things in a way that makes players want to stay? Now, don't get me wrong, there are some people who've done a shocking job of live ops. I mean, I'm not going to talk about Battlegrounds. See, I don't even have to say more. I don't have to say the number of the game. You know what I'm talking about. And by the way, people often conflate it with free-to-play. Now, there's actually some good reason to. I won't get into pricing strategy for this one. If anyone wants me to talk about that at some point, you'll have my email at the end of this. I can give you cards. I can talk about it. I can talk endlessly. Be afraid. Be very afraid. So it's not an evil plot. It's actually about caring about players. Wrong way around. Right. What it's about is getting more players, doing more things, more often, and for longer. Whoops. Now, that's it. That's it. That's the end of it. You know, we're done now. More players, doing more things, more often and for longer. You know everything you need to know about live ops with those phrases. But let's go a little bit further. So, for example, what is the point of this? Well, product life cycle. Anyone heard of the term product life cycle? Anyone done any economics? And you never thought this would be useful. Jeffrey Moore's Crossing the Chasm. The two people in the room who know what I'm talking about when I say that. This is actually ridiculously relevant. I never thought my A-level economics would be useful. Apparently it is. Product life cycle. When we sell a bundled product, a fixed package thing on Steam, or a physical good, or whatever else, we have to get enough people excited. That's what the peak is, the awareness and interest. We have to get enough excited so they get over the barriers to buy that game. So think about how excited you've got to be, not only to be able to spend the money on a game you've not played yet, that you're relying on the hype of other people to play, you don't know if you're going to like yet, and you don't know if it's any good either. And you don't know if you've got enough space on your phone or your PC or your console. So what you're going to have to delete, all of these obstacles are barriers. We don't think about that often enough, but we should. We should be thinking about what's going on for the player. Why should they care? Regardless of whether you're doing a beautiful narrative arc journey that is going to be loving and delicious, but it's one time, start, middle, and end. That's okay. If you're making those, no comment from me. It's all good. I like those things too. But I'm more often thinking, what's over that other hill? What's that next thing I could do? How can I get that kind of, again, someone's going to hate me on this, but Fallout 76 is something I got really into last year because I like the grind. I like mucking about, getting a whole bunch of stuff, and then crafting a whole bunch of stuff, and then going and do the next mission. I'm actually wasting my time most of the time. But that's why I'm playing the game. So, I mean, again, the difference between that and this, which is the live service, that's the sort of more like the Fallout 76 type games, although arguably they charge up front and they charge in-game. Thank goodness for Xbox Game Pass. It's now a free-to-play game. By the way, that's why I started playing it, because it became essentially for me, as an Xbox Gold, Ultimate, whatever they call it now, member, it became free to play for me. And I spent lots of money because I'm silly. Okay, right. Not silly, because I really like the game now. I hated it when it was launched. Again, notice, we have this wall. Because we've got still, even if it's free to play, we've still got to worry about what other things am I doing. Have I got enough space on my device? Don't know how the game's going to play. So you've still got to get their level of interest up. But I don't know what the percentage is anymore, but it used to be something like 10x the number of people would go into a free-to-play game than would go to a paid-up game. And actually it works out to being slightly more than would spend. Therefore, you actually get more value as a game developer by being free. Let's not go into that. That's another topic for another time. If you're interested, there's a book called Predictably Irrational by a guy called Dan Ariely that talks about Hershey's Kisses and Lindt chocolates. I will leave that with you in case you're interested in free. But ignoring that, what we're saying here is that once we do a live service, we have to care what happens after the install. With the pay up front game, weirdly, we don't. We've already got their money, so we're evil, and we're going to be a pay up front game, not a live ops game, because if we're actually evil, we want to get their money quickly and run away. We don't, honestly, we don't. We all actually want to have enough people talk about the game, so we still can't be evil. But actually what we want to do is sustain long-term engagement. And we'll talk a bit about that. Part of that is understanding the life cycle. The life cycle is we discover the game, we learn about the game, we're going to have the worst possible experience as we learn about the game, because we don't know the controls, we don't know how it fits, we don't know why we're playing it, we know why we thought we were playing it. Very rarely is the same reason why we keep playing a game. But also, we haven't yet found this rhythm, this fit into our daily routine, or weekly routine, depending on the game's cadence. Part of our job, running live ops games, is to make sure we catch people before they churn and turn them into engaging players. And the nice thing, the delicious thing about this is that we can sometimes find players that love our game so much, they super engage. People have used the term whale many, many times. Do not use it. It is the wrong term. I am guilty of using it in the early days. I've stopped using it about 5 years ago. Why? Because whale is a gambling term for people who have huge amounts of cash that go to Vegas and stay there until they run out of cash. That is a different behavior than people who are super fans of your game. I want to give super fans of my game lots of things they want to buy because that's what they want. Because that means I can then go make a bigger, more interesting game for everybody. That seems to me to be a perfectly positive thing to do. So if we can identify super engaged players, fantastic, because we want to engage players. Pretty easy. But then on top of that, we want to re-engage. Because people get to the stage where, yeah, they played that, it's fine. Why should they carry on playing for 6 months, 9 months, a year, 2 years, 10 years? Think about Candy Crush and Clash of Clans. There is no reason why games can't last for tens of years, but only a very, very, very small number of games will achieve that. But just it's possible, so why don't we plan for it? Okay, so tip 1. So how do we get there? I've told you hopefully a little bit about what live ops is. Now we're going to talk about how we get there. The first one is to think about the player life cycle as a funnel. So we're not just thinking about how we get people into the game, it's how we get more people discovering, then engaging, then converting. So because we do want people to spend money on an ongoing basis, because if we don't match the business model of our game to how we manage it, we'll run out of money, we'll go broke, we won't be able to pay our staff, we won't be able to make the game. So, that's perfectly practical stuff. So understanding that is really interesting. What's fascinating to me is your super engaged fans pull your engaged fans, because they show off all the cool stuff. If you see someone with a really cool outfit that was only possible to obtain by unlocking this particular achievement or doing this particular mission that was only available during this particular period of time, that's cool. That's genuinely cool. And engaged players want to talk about that. I met this guy that did this. So the next time something cool turns up, they want part of that too. So that's what we're trying to do. So activating players, helping convert those players, and then using the sort of, not using, enjoying your super engaged fans, helping them show off, giving them social capital, because we love bragging rights, don't we? We all love, Fortnite would not be making any money if we didn't love bragging rights. We don't even get to see our outfit in Fortnite. We see the back of it. And yet people spend huge amounts of money on that. It's all for the kudos. So giving people that kudos, really key. And then if we get that right, the community of players will talk about it. Will share their excitement for our game, and that's where we get real virality. Tip 2, think about your audience. Break it down your audience into 3 types, 3 personas, 3 named people. You know, what do they think? What do they feel? What do they say? What they do? I've got Ahmed over there, who is my IT support self-confessed gamer. I'm using him to design my game mechanics, my core game loop. I'm also using him to find my key audience on certain types of media when I'm doing marketing. I'm also thinking about him in terms of what his likely spend criteria is, and therefore, how do I think about my game economy? How do I think about my game monetization? Secondly, my second audience, Jackie, 44-year-old journalist, blogger, active gamer, but doesn't like to talk about it. And Jackie, you know, has to be careful on spending in games. You know, we've got this thinks, feels, does, says. I look at Jackie as a different personality, a way of thinking about the game differently. I'm looking at her for the context, what I call the context loop. That means I'm looking at her for the point of progression. So not the core mechanics. I'm assuming that I've got the mechanics right because I've worked with Ahmed's identity as his personality to make sure I think about how the game should play. But now I'm giving you a reason to keep playing. So if I just think about the one person, I'm not going to get that experience to feel right for a broader audience. And that's the key here. That's why we want to have more than one audience in mind when we're designing, when we're thinking about marketing, because we want to broaden our scale of audience as well. So thinking about our second type is the context loop, and I'm going to talk about the third type with metagame later. I'll talk about what metagame is on the next slide. But so having these 3 personas allows you to have 3 different lenses to think about how players will think, feel, see, and what they will actually do. And so rarely are they the same thing. Next tip, loops. I told you I'd tell you about metagame. Now, a lot of people describe what I call context loop as a metagame. I'm going to try and convince you why that's wrong. Well, wrong is unfair, but you know why I prefer not to do that. So, for the core mechanic, I want to know that I've got something that's repeatable. Why? Because you're going to be asking them to do the same thing for 10 years. Why would you not want to make sure that was really cool and so cool that you'd keep doing it? And yes, there'd be variations. There'd be you need to have emergent properties that keep it fresh and exciting, and reasons why you can improve, and reasons why your skill matters, why taking time matters, grind matters. All these things are really important. But at the heart of it is a good, solid start condition, challenge, resolution, reward. Little extra bonus trick for you. If you're interested, I wrote an article on this. I wrote an article on validating your game ideas, which came out in Pocket Gamer earlier this week. I think you need to think about the emotion of the player in each of these loops. How they move from frustration to relief. So those of you who know about flow or Csikszentmihalyi will know what I'm talking about there. If not, then come and grab me afterwards. I'll tell you all about it. I promise I won't bore you too much. But thinking about the movement of flow to frustration and frustration back to relief, those things are really important. But also thinking about movement from anticipation to fear of missing out. And taking the player from the start condition, challenge, resolution, reward, through those emotional states will help you identify where the fun is, will help you identify if it's repeatable and replayable. So thinking about the mechanic, the things we do. Then the context, why we do it. So here, the lifestyle fit. How many of you think about the lifestyle fit of the device and the way the game is played? So if you're playing on a mobile game, you know most people are going to be playing it on the toilet. They're going to be sitting there with their phone on the toilet. And if you have a game play more than like a minute and a half, guess what? They do something else instead. So the device physically changes the mode of use of play, the mood that the player is in, what time in their daily routine they choose yours. For example, mobile phone games are fantastic for the equivalent of a cigarette break. Or probably whilst you're having a cigarette break if you're a smoker. I'm not, but I can see why. But if you think about a PC, so I will go to my study, or my office really, and I will escape from the family, and I will spend 6 hours playing on a PC game, because it takes me like 2 hours to get it set up and working properly, because some download I've got to do, or some upgrade on Microsoft, or whatever it might be. But then I'm in it for a particular period of time. That affects how I play. It affects what I'm willing to put up with. So anyone played Gran Turismo on PS5 recently? 15 minutes unskippable video at the start of the game. I nearly threw the whole thing out in the bin. Don't do that. Imagine if you did that on mobile. Imagine if you had a 15-minute unskippable video on a mobile game. How many of you would still be watching it? 0. Anyway, so the point is, thinking about all those things. Now, what on earth? Oh, sorry. I think I've got this the wrong way around. Yes, I've got this the wrong way around. So context should be purpose, progression, optimization, narrative, and metagame should be lifestyle fit, collaboration, and competition are the social angles. But zeitgeist, why does zeitgeist appear? Because why should someone talk about your game? And so, again, apologies, I've swapped these images. But the reason is you need to be thinking about why someone will be talking about your game. Having played your game, why are they going to go and tweet about it? Having played your game, why would they watch someone else play your game? Having not even seen or heard of your game, why would watching someone else playing that game be interesting? And even if you're making a mobile game, if you make a simple kind of game, if you don't think about the social context, games are being played now, you have missed out on the whole point of this. More people watch game-related video now than watch Hulu, Prime, Netflix combined. If you're not thinking about the social zeitgeist of your game, you are not making a game that anyone's going to pay attention to. So that's important. All right, so he says, data. Tip 4, data. Data. I cannot tell you how important data is. It is absolutely critical. I remember being in PlayStation, trying to convince the PlayStation home team that we should be collecting data on things so we knew what on earth was happening in the game. I do not mean cynical spy stuff. I do not mean personally identifiable information. I don't want to know what an individual does. I want to know what a cohort of individuals do, a group with a common set of behaviors, because I cannot infer what other people will do from one person. I need to see what a group of people do to make meaningful decisions about how to make my game better. So I'm not interested in spyware. I'm interested in understanding what players care about and not what they do, because players lie. Actually, that's not fair. They lie. If you ask someone how great your game is, they're going to say, it's great, I love it, thank you. They don't like it at all. They're going to go and play something else. But they'll tell you that because they don't want to hurt your feelings. Why would they? I mean, they're generally nice people. Although you actually get some who actually go the opposite way around. And they'll tell you everything that's wrong with it, but in a completely unhelpful way with no information about what you could possibly do to fix it. This thing is shit. That thing is rubbish. I don't need to know that. Fine, I accept that. But what is it that makes it not good? So how do we get to the bottom of that? We get to the bottom of that through data. So data has completely transformed games. So we want to know why mobile has completely dominated over the last 5 years, 10 years? It's data. Oh, yeah, okay. It's also the fact that it's the most portable device. Okay. It's also the point that everybody's got one. Okay, it's also the point that now it's broken down barriers for people who would probably never have played games before. But all that aside, data is why we managed to make it. And actually, the reason why of the 24 platinum games on Steam, so the games that have earned the most money on Steam, 22 are free to play. All of them are live ops based. All of them. The 2 that aren't free to play are Among Us and It Takes Two, I think. Don't quote me on that. I think that's right. I may have misremembered that. But that's the point. If you think that live ops doesn't apply to me because I'm on PC or because I'm on Steam, you're wrong. Sorry, Don't get me wrong, I'm not being smug here. I just want you to wake up to the fact that actually live ops is about caring about the player long term. So even if you are making a portfolio of standalone games, you still have to keep a way of managing your community, engaging with your community. You have to help them engage with you, because why would you spend all that money, all that effort recruiting someone once, which is very expensive, when you can help them stay aware of what else you're going to do? That's still providing a service. So whether you're a portfolio studio, whether you're a live ops studio, all of this stuff still applies. It's just you're going to do it differently. Anyway, so data is really important. Now, obviously, I've talked a little bit about security. You need to do a data protection impact analysis on your game regardless because of GDPR. But there are other rules that are coming in, particularly in the UK. There's a rule called AADC, so it's Age Appropriate Design Code. That rule applies to anyone selling games to a UK audience, wherever they are, and they can fine you something like 19 million euros, something like that, don't quote me, but something like that, or 7% of your global total revenue, whichever is larger. Larger. So this is massively impactful. So understand how you're managing data and do that properly. We did some work for the ICO. We've actually got some advice. I think it's on our knowledge base. If not, then obviously please feel free to reach out to me. But there's another magic thing about data. Content can be configuration. If I change the stats, if I change the physics, if I change the frequency a particular power-up pops up, if I change the difficulty with a number on the server, I don't have to upload the build again, and the experience with a little change in narrative can be completely different and awesome. And that's a lot easier than trying to spend a coder taking 3 months building a new feature. Why wouldn't we do more of that? That to me just seems sensible. That's what live ops is about. We also, tip 5 is you're typically going to have milestone-based requirements from publishers. They will probably unlock after a certain amount of features that are delivered to you, a certain amount of money. I think it's a bad way to work. I could be wrong, but my feeling is that that's not going to help you. Now, don't get me wrong. Work with your publisher. They'll have their own reasons to do it, whoever your publisher is. The reason we don't do that is because I want to know that at the initial point where I'm going to sell a game, that the user cares enough. So I'm going to do a 30-second trailer on Facebook even before your game is ready. Because I just want to know if it's worth it. Why would anyone care? And this is PC and mobile. I just want to know there's enough interest in this idea at all, because why are you spending hundreds of thousands of euros making a game that no one cares about? Wouldn't it be better to find a way to make it so that whatever your game is going to be is something that's attractive to those players? So let's get that right first, so we can then spend our money on making a game that's going to work. Don't get me wrong, I want to inspire people to do great, amazing, really creative things, of course. But let's do it cheaply to find the thing that people care about first. And I can spend £150 on a Facebook trailer and get an immediate understanding in 3 days. In just 3 days of £50 a day, I get to work out if that game's going to have a chance. It's not a definitive it will work, but it is a way of getting rid of bad ideas. Ideas that won't be commercial. Why am I doing that? Because actually, hyper-casual games are really cost-effective ways of making games. So why don't we learn from what they've done that's good for other longer-term survival games, and instead optimize the way we make the right games for our audience. We don't have to take everything from hyper-casual. I'm not trying to say make dumb games that you spend lots of time looking at ads. Nothing wrong with that, by the way. I do that. I play those games. But that's not what I'm interested in making. Doesn't mean I can't learn from how they make those games. So I look at that. I do a usability test. So I'll use things like Antidote or Playtest Cloud to review how other people play the game. I'll get a video recording of how they're played. Again, I want to do this early. I want to do this at the point where I've got an hour's worth of play, maybe 30 minutes worth of play. because I want to understand, do players actually enjoy it? I want to get, when I start doing data analysis later, I want to have somebody else's experience, not mine. I'm a experienced developer. I'm experienced at playing tens of thousands of games. Tens of thousands of games, that's ridiculous, I'm that old. And I've judged so many games. Oh, I'm so judgmental. But the point is that that's the problem. I want to know what real people, general people who don't wear top hats, think about this game. And if I can use that, that's going to be good. Then I'm going to look at, that will give me a thing called a Net Promoter Score. You know I said that everyone lies when they give you feedback? There is actually a little trick called a Net Promoter Score. What that means is, you ask them, did they like the game? Fine. You know that that's going to probably be a wrong answer. You then ask them, would they play it again? That's actually slightly more likely to be correctly answered. Then you ask them, would you recommend to a friend? Oddly, the moment you put someone in the point of view where they have to say, would that other person like this thing, they're a little bit more honest. So if you can get your Net Promoter Score, which is what recommending to a friend is referred to in the vaulted echelons of marketing speak, Net Promoter Score, which is this, would you recommend it to a friend, is a really key number. What is your game's Net Promoter Score? I bet you none of you know it. But that really matters. That's going to help you get ahead of the game by far. Now, then we get to sort of launch. And obviously, we're going to do small launches at first. I don't talk about betas anymore, but I'm looking at retention. I'm looking at day 1, day 7. Actually, I'm looking at day 1, day 3, day 7, day 14, day 30, day 60, day 90, day 120. That's a lot. That's a lot of work. Now, typically, I'll stop at day 30 with, then I'll go on to what I call a ROAS test. Anyone know what the term ROAS means? I bet there's no one in the room who knows what the term ROAS means. Oh, go for it. What's ROAS mean? No? Oh, okay. Return on advertising spend. That's what ROAS means. Why do we want to know? Because we kind of need to know if we spend this much money, we're going to get it back. Who knew marketing was such rocket science? Anyway, the point is that we're actually trying to work out what the KPIs are. We're trying to work out whether this game is working. But what we want to do is work it out as early as possible, so if something's not going to work, we stop and build another game instead. Kill it early. I know it's hard. You've got to kill your darlings. But actually, nothing is lost if you're learning from it. You want to see what's worked. You want to adapt what's worked. But for goodness sake, let's build a game that players want to play. And we can find that out through data. We can find that out by having these stages, these gateways, so we can say, yep, this is working. No, this isn't. You don't kill it straight away, by the way. You look at it, and you have another go. You make a hypothesis about what will change. You test that hypothesis. And when you test that hypothesis, you look at the rate of change. If things improve dramatically, great. Fantastic, we keep going. If things do not improve at all, or maybe even get worse, then maybe you've got a dog. You've got a game that's not going to work. So that's the thing. It's like always treat your game as a hypothesis that you will test. If you can't prove your game will succeed or fail, you're not making a hypothesis. How can you possibly be successful if you're not doing that? Except through complete sheer luck. And I'd rather spend money on things that are useful rather than gambling, because I like games. I don't like gambling, personally. Anyway, and also the last thing, my favorite stat on all the planet is repeat spend. Percentage of repeat spenders. Why? Because if they bought it more than once, I must have sold them something they liked. I don't say silly, but it's the best indicator we've got that what we've made and what we've sold people was actually worthwhile if they're willing to do it again. So anyway, the key thing is the difference between these two shades, by the way, is that's the product version, and that's when we scale by running live ops. Okay, that was our tip 4. Tip 5, sorry. Tip 6, the live loop. Yes, live ops is endless. Live ops cannot survive not churn, what am I talking about? Crunch. Anyone a fan of crunch? Okay. I take those laughs as, yes, you love it. That's not management failure. You cannot do crunch with live ops because you have to have a schedule, a pipeline. You have to keep lanes. I'll talk about lanes later. You need to make sure you build in time for holiday, sick leave, maternity, paternity, other issues that come up. If you don't build that into your planning, you're going to be stuffed because you've got to maintain it. So you have to have a pipeline of activity that can be managed efficiently, because otherwise you're not going to make any money because you're spending all your money hiring new staff because your staff are leaving you because they're completely broken by your bad processes. So how does the live loop work? So we have events. I'll talk a little bit about what events are later. Actually, no. Let me just check. Am I going to talk about that? Yes, I am. So I'll talk about events. I'll talk about promotions. Promotions, by which I mean offers to buy things. Normally, you have an event, something to do. That's not something that's about sales. Promotions are the things that we do to sell things. Right. Content. We have content releases. That's provided by the developer normally. Features, again, functional differences, improvements. Now, the frequency we do these things is going to be different for every game. I'll go into that in a bit. We then have community activities, which may or may not be related to the events. There may be an additional. There may be self-generated. Fantastic. But communities are really important because communities should be driving forward all the other activity, including user acquisition or growth or whatever you want to call it. So we get that growth. We then feed that into revenue. We feed that into events. We feed that. So nice, positive loop if we get it right. So what are events? Well, I don't think most of us are going to be running a huge, hundreds of thousands of people in a sports arena, esports right now, I suspect. Don't get me wrong, it's happened, it's possible, and we're seeing increasingly that kind of stuff happening. Even small in-world events are fantastic. That's not necessarily what I mean, but it does still count. Event can be as simple as updated daily missions, which we can schedule in advance. We can actually even randomize, potentially. If you have randomized, a sufficient number of randomized challenges and daily missions, you might be able to set it up and never change it. I still think you should review it and update it, but the level of work isn't actually that great. Again, it could be the configuration of the gameplay. You could have new missions, specific missions for a day, specific missions for a week. You could have things like, one of my favorite things was a game called Art of War Legions, and they introduced this idea of you've got to fight Cerberus, the three-headed dog. And then the idea was the whole community got to fight Cerberus, and they had to do enough damage to defeat Cerberus collectively. Fantastic. They kind of stuffed it up. They made it so Cerberus didn't have enough hit points for the total number of players playing, and they only had one enemy. They didn't divide the audience up, so everybody was fighting the same enemy. What they should have done is have three factions. Like Pokemon Go has red, green, and blue, or red, yellow, and blue. Well, I can't remember. Red, yellow, and blue. Now imagine you had three factions fighting Cerberus. And instead of defeat Cerberus, it's who does the most damage to Cerberus. Then, next month, we can have, isn't it amazing, red team defeated Cerberus because they're the team that got the most points. So now we've made part of lore the faction that you were randomly assigned to that you had no choice of, but you are still nominally part of, has done this thing. It's now part of game lore. We can then move that forward, and guess how much work that was? Just a little bit of setting up, and the rest was done by the players. I'm trying to get you to think about this efficiently. Events don't have to be massively curated experiences. They can be smart use of data. But they can also be these beautiful themes. I had to have a Fallout 76 reference. But you have these beautiful themes, escape to the 42nd century. And then you've got these outfits, you've got these objects in the game that then have skins and they're available for sale and stuff. Now, okay, this particular one is mostly about sales. But actually, the driving force is a narrative frame that's going on and affecting the world around you. The promotional part is the bit that comes second. The other thing I think was interesting is things like in Fortnite having people like Marshmallow and various other acts playing live in the game. I remember we had PlayStation Home, we had Dizzy Rascal launch his album back in the day. These things have been around for a while, but they've become particularly common now. You're probably not going to immediately have some major pop star turn up in your game, but what are the real world, connections you can have in your experience? Is that relevant to you? Are there ways of thinking differently where you can actually highlight individual players and make it personal, make it much more social? That's the sort of thing that events can do, even if it's just a case of how you communicate on your social media channels. Just thinking about that. Even having a debate. What do people love in terms of games like this? What things should we bring? Should you, create an event around getting people to play through new features so you can decide which feature stays, which feature goes? Just a thought. Promotions, again, all about money. Okay, fair enough. We do want to earn some money. I know some of you may be quite fine making hobby games. That's okay. No critique here. But as a commercial game venture, we need to make revenues that are sustainable over the long term. That means that for a living game, we need to make sure we're getting new revenues from players each month. Now, that doesn't have to be cynical. That can be positive. We can have offers, we can have bundles, we can have packages, we can have seasons. I love battle passes. I love battle passes which allow you to play through and get things that give you motivations to keep playing. In fact, where the thing I love most about battle passes is that you get more by playing more. I think that's a really good philosophy. In your monetization, how do people get more by playing more? Because we're trying to make things that players love. We're not going to make things that players love if we get them to pay to skip playing the game. People who skip playing the game are crazy. Now, there are some circumstances. For example, Dark Souls. Had you given me the chance to pay for a save, I would have spent thousands of dollars. However, I have not played Elden Ring because I know my life will disappear. However, my point is we can think differently. We don't have to have this like bundles of gems and you get this amount of discount. Actually, it works. It's fine. But people aren't buying the gems. They're buying the things that the gems buy them. And as long as you remember that, you're fine. Anyway, that's promotions. Features. So features aren't necessarily what you think they are. I use features that was something that the coders had to make. Content is something that doesn't need a coder. Kind of. I mean, it's a rough division, but you get my drift. I think communicating what your roadmap is really important. The most important thing, which we'll get to later, is predictability. If you say you're going to deliver something, you deliver it. I don't care what happens, you deliver it. But the answer isn't crunch. The answer is don't promise until you know. Promise after you're sure. Because one of the things we're not honest with players sometimes. We say, we're going to do this feature. Actually, we don't know if the feature's going to work until we've got it. So why are we telling them we're going to deliver this feature in this way? Why aren't we saying to them, we're going to work on these ideas. When it's ready for testing, we'll tell you. When it's in testing, we'll tell you when it's going to be released. I think being honest with players about the development process is a much more effective thing to do. But you will get a lot of demand. Guess what? You can say, we're not doing that right now. It's okay. Provided when you say you're going to do it, you do it. And provided you are showing and demonstrating you're listening and understanding what they're asking and trying to help them see why you can or can't do that thing. As long as they understand that you're approaching it authentically and positively and that you actually care about their player experience, I think you're okay. Well, in my 24 years, that's been the case. But what I've seen time and time again, failure, is when somebody has said, we're going to do this thing, when they haven't even spec'd it. What's the Unity classic one? Was it clustered prefabs or something? I can't remember what it was. I always used to get, when I was a Unity evangelist, I used to always get attacked because we didn't have this clustered prefab system that was promised years and years ago. I think it may have something like it now. But the point thing is, the amount of flack you get. We had one in PlayStation Home, which was trophy rooms. In 2007, Phil Harrison promised the GDC that PlayStation Home would be launched with 3D trophy rooms. Fantastic. Except what he didn't know is that Shin, in the Sony board meeting, would renege on that promise meaning they wouldn't mandate 3D trophies, meaning it was impossible for us ever to make 3D trophy room. That was politics, that's fine. But the point is that you can't make a promise you can't keep. So features are functional things, but do small things. Do one big thing that you can then present in small stages. So do a tournament system, but okay, so we've done the tournament system. It's taken a lot of time to build that. Now we're going to do a round-robin tournament. That is the feature we're going to announce. Then we're going to do the league tournament. That is the next feature we'll announce. Give yourself a break. Give yourself a chance to communicate things. But also, these are discrete experiences. Let's deliver them as discrete experiences. Content. What is content? As I said, content is what doesn't need a coder to make. But content is stuff that we collect. So assets, skins, stuff like that. Everyone loves a skin. A lot of people focus on skins. Skins is like type 1 monetization. It has some value where the game has a sufficiently sizable audience for anyone to care. When you're launching a brand new game and you only got a few thousand to spend on it, are you likely to have an audience that's going to care? Probably not. Don't get me wrong, you can get them to the stage, but that's fine. But if you're relying on Fortnite-style monetization, you need Fortnite-style audiences. How do you get them? That's a problem to consider. Collection is good, though. Collection is a mindset. I have to get them all, classic Pokemon mindset. That is a good thing. You can still leverage that. Progression. How do I help me progress through the game? For progression to be a good content piece, I've got to care about that progression. I've got to imagine that progression. Optimization. I love optimization. This is the Fallout. I'm sitting there and I'm going to go and kill all these little things in order to collect the particular resource that creature has, or I'm going to go explore this base again because I know that base has clocks in it, which if I break them down, I'm going to get these springs. I need these springs to be able to build that particular thing. Whatever it might be. The Long Dark is another really good example of where that kind of optimization. There's a thing called hot dog economics that's worth thinking about. Again, back to that book by Dan Ariely called Predictably Irrational. Hot dog economics is like this. You get hot dogs in 8s. You get buns in 6s. So I always need more buns for my dogs. But then I've got too many buns. So let me go get some more hot dog. This imbalance, which is a little cynical in the world of hot dogs, I know. But this imbalance is actually your friend in games, because not quite fulfilling the economics of the game in your dynamic system is really good to give players self-motivating tasks. So use them if you can. It's not appropriate for every game, I get it. But I just thought I'd check it out there. Hero's journey, so if you're writing narrative is good. But thinking about that as content is also good. And then other players. Possibly the single most important thing that I'd recommend people think about is other players. Now, I've spent a lot of time talking. I'm going to try and rattle through the rest so you've got some time for questions. But community, tip 8. Community is your lifeblood. Community for living games is life. So you've got to think about their expectations. You've got to help set that. And that does drive your community forward. Awareness drives your community forward. We have to understand what they think, what they feel, what they say, what they do. Same as any of the personas we talked about earlier. But we have to be aware of frustration and deal with it. We have to have problem management in place. We have to do triage. We also need to make sure we eliminate toxicity. Particularly prolific in the classic shooter games, because it had this tradition from QuakeNet where, basically dumping on your mates was part of the fun. That's not necessarily appropriate in other game formats, but it's been leaking across. So we have to deal with that. We have a zero tolerance on abusive behavior regardless. But also when you're dealing with different audiences, particularly children audiences, there are a lot more stringent rules, and you are accountable for that. So if you've got communication systems in your game, you have to pay attention, otherwise you could be in deep trouble. The last thing you want to find out is that someone's been grooming on your game channels. That's really, really bad. So your team has to have the tools and systems in place and the attitude to deal with that and identify people who are acting inappropriately. Anyone know who this guy is? It's a bit of an American 1970s Columbo. Yes. Now, arguably the best television show ever made. By the way, it's not me that says that. There's a guy called Stephen Fry, very famous guy in the UK, who has regularly said this. The reason it's the best show ever made is because it's a whodunit, where you see at the beginning who did it, but you still watch it. Why? Why would you do that? It's because he's an idiot. He's a bumbling fool. And you're watching the show to find out how he solves it. And there's a clue at the end. There's a predictable moment, 5 minutes approximately before the end of the show. It's never quite perfectly timed, and deliberately so, because it's a kind of pressing timeline that could happen at any point. There's a tension there. At the end of the show, he says, just one more thing. And that's when you know he's solved it. He's saying that to the killer. He's going to tell the killer how he solved it. Were you right or not? Because you've been watching him. You've been watching the detective. And you're trying to guess from the things you saw in the show what he did to solve it. And it could be anything. It could be random stuff that was never intended. It could be just some stranger walking by that got caught in camera. And you might go, that's the one. Completely unrelated. And that's the delight. The producers didn't have to make everything perfect because you filled in the blanks as the viewer. And this is, for me, the perfect metaphor for how we think about live ops. Particularly this ability to create predictable surprise that is leaving space for players to fill for themselves, but there is an inevitable point where that will be delivered. That's magic. So thinking about that, that's really important. And the nice thing about it as well is if you were right, you're delighted. And if you're wrong, you're delighted because you find something out you missed. Again, perfect attitude for games. So tip 10, split your planning between content and features. Split your content into themes. Make sure you've got content for each week. Split your feature releases into 3. Features, bug fixes or tech debt, and better UX. You'll notice that I want 3 features, 1 a month. They're tiny, tiny, tiny slices. That's how little time you're going to have to make new features each month. So you've got to plan around that. And I talked about lanes earlier, but the lanes thing is matters. So think about this, right? So design 1 happens the first month. Second month, you've got dev. And that's assuming, this is months or quarters, doesn't matter. Dev and art going on. And then however long you take on that, you've then got your testing to do. Let's say that takes the same amount of time. It might be less, but let's say it takes the same amount of time. Then you push it live. But I've got to keep the design team working, and they're going to be working on the next thing, but they haven't got the results yet of the tests, so they're going to be designing in complete blindness. But they've got to do that in order to be able to get the dev team working. But the dev team are going to be working in complete blindness because they don't know if the test has worked yet or not on the other side. So you can see how this kind of rolls on and rolls on. This is the problem of creating a pipeline. Live ops means creating a pipeline. Penultimate one, nearly done. Service thinking. There's a system called HACCP, which was designed by Pillsbury and NASA to feed the astronauts on the Apollo missions. And the idea is that you can't test the food. Because if you're going to have a package, you're going to put onto a spacecraft that they're going to be spending, days in space. If you've pierced the packet to test it, you've ruined it. So you have to do all the testing needed to get to the point where you know it's going to be safe before and without opening. So you have to go back and work out what are the potential hazards, what are the controls that you do have, and how can you fix them. In games, it's the same. What are the behaviors we want to have happen? What are the behaviors we don't want to have happen? Let's identify them. Then let's work out where in the flow we can manage that. But also, what does good look like? How often do you sit down and think, what does good look like? And if you get that right, you can then correct and improve the process, but always review the process itself. Always review your live ops ongoing, because it's about continuous improvement. Last tip. Love your players. Love live. If you don't love your players, if you don't love live, you're not going to be successful. And that's what live ops should be about, is creating experiences that players love, that they care about, they want to engage with. That's what's going to make a live ops thing. It doesn't have to kill your team to run a live ops experience. It requires pre-thought. It requires getting systems on back ends early. It requires configuration, so you're not reliant on your dev team to be working against a content treadmill, which means that they want to kind of lose the will to live because they're constantly having to make the same t-shirts every frickin' month. Instead, we can be smarter about it and think about the player experience. Thank you very much.